so much. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, how cool is it that we're in this room in the Strand? I mean, oh my God, pinch me. Thank you so much. Thank you, Emily, and to everybody who's helped us get here. Before we start, I just want to point out a few people in this audience who I think are wonderful and amazing. First of all, there's some other contributors in the book that are here who can sign your book afterwards and also answer your questions. I'm just forcing them to do that by saying that. But if they can stand up, that would be great. Where's Tony Ingrazano? He's right there. That's what he looks like. He's in the book. And Amanda Church, can you stand up? Woo! Bill Carroll. And is anybody else in the book here? I don't think so, except for you guys. You're all here, and they know you. And then also, I just want to say a few other people are here. Heather Pontanio from the Tremaine Foundation is right here, if you want to say hello. And then Randy Cohen, the Randy Cohen, who is amazing. He's right here. Stand up. Amazing. I don't know if you know Randy. He was the former ethicist for the New York Times, and also he actually created the top 10 list for David Letterman. I love saying that. Isn't that cool? Did everybody know that? I don't know if everybody know that. So is everybody going to come up and talk to him about that, or maybe give him some, I don't know, are you still in touch with him? You're not in touch with him.
Every day.
You meet every day, yeah. So, okay. So first I want to say, and thank you all for being here. It's really lovely to be here and just wonderful. This book has been an amazing labor of love. I just want to talk a little bit about the book itself, and then we'll get into the conversation. What we want to do is have maybe about 20, 25, 30-minute conversation between us to warm all of you up, and then we'll have a Q&A after that for about a half hour, and then we'll mingle and sign books, and maybe you can exchange numbers and stay in touch with everybody, and that would be great. That's what I always dream about. Okay, from these events. So this event is the 23rd stop in a 45-stop book tour all over the country. We are over halfway done, which is amazing. We have been all over the country. Well, we haven't been to California. I'm about to leave next week for 3.5 weeks for now 11 stops in California. And then after that, we go to Texas and Boston and Rhode Island, and in the fall, since the 92nd Street Y event sold out, they asked us to come back again in the fall, and I think I'm going to end it with that at the end of the year, so I can get back to my studio work. My own work. But this book, Living and Sustaining Creative Life, happened because about 2.5 years ago, Intellect Books, which is the publisher of this book, along with University of Chicago Press, which is the distributor, they work together. This is a learning lesson for me too. I've never done a book before, so I've learned that these two organizations work together, distributor and publisher. But anyway, they came to me and said, we want you to write a book. And I said, I just don't want, there's nothing I can talk about in a book. I'm not an expert about anything. But they said, well, what would it be that you would want to give out there? What do you want to be able to say? And there's always been something that has bothered me. So this is amazing therapy, especially doing these book events, because I get to talk about it over and over and over again, is that where I teach and all different places all over the country, where I teach, graduate students would say to me, or even undergrad, they would say, I'm graduating and I need to find a gallery. Where do you find a gallery? That would be their first thing that they would ask me. And I would be bothered by that, because I know that there are only a small, and everybody here probably knows this too, a small number of galleries out there for artists, and a small number, and many, many artists. And there's no way, I think, possible to be able to meet all the demands of every artist or have them work with every gallery that's out there. So to me, that was like more about the mentality that it's in a dependent system, and that to me bothered me, because I think right now is the best time to be an artist. There's so many different things that an artist can do to sustain a creative life. So instead of me preaching about that, I thought, wow, why don't I get 40 people together? In this case, in this book, there are 40 people, 19 from New York, just because I've been here for 23 years, and that's my community, 19 from the rest of the country, and 2 people from Europe. ages 30 to 66. And I asked every one of them to be able to just talk about how they sustain a creative life. And some essays are more opaque than others, that they actually start a conversation, and the other essays end a thought and a conversation. I think most of them, for me, I like the fact that they start a conversation that needs to be had, because artists are resilient. We are all resilient. The way that we think in our creative practice can be applied to how we can survive as artists. So anyway, so we're going to I have these questions for these guys, and I want to also talk about a big thing that's come up in the book tour is also the difference with perception and reality, the perception of what is success for an artist, and also implied success for an artist in the marketplace, and what's the reality of how artists live. And so that's why I really, Josh in particular, can really talk about that. I'm putting on the spot. Can really talk about that. Josh is an art lover. He's a collector, and he's also brilliant in the marketplace, where things I can't even talk about that he does. I actually don't have any idea what Graham Fisher does so much. But I mean, I have some idea, but not exactly. But he is brilliant, and to be able to talk about how I think the art world, the art as a product and commodity, and how the rest of the world also looks at that, which I think is very interesting. So anyway, I want to just start too, and this may sound like a negative, but it's sort of in the reality too. On the book tour, I've noticed that the public thinks an artist looks a certain way. You probably can imagine that. They only should and do make a certain amount of money. Heaven forbid, right? And then that we're lazy people. That's what isn't that terrible? All three are wrong, wrong, wrong. So I'm really bothered by that. Again, therapy. These book sessions are therapy for me. So I want to ask these guys too, because I asked them in advance to talk about this. What do you think about that assessment and of a contemporary artist living and working today? And how is the public's assumption different than who you know of yourself as an artist and who an artist is today? And that also goes into, like, how much do we do to support ourselves and live a sustaining life? So do you want to start with that? You're right next to me. There's a reason.
Okay. I'll speak for myself, but also the artists I know and can generalize about. I think we're among the hardest working people I know. I think for most of us, it's more a question of making us stopping ourselves ever from working. So I hope that debunks the idea that we're lazy. I've never seen a lazy artist. Can't even imagine what that would be like.
But how is it that we work so hard? What are the elements, like for you in your studio, the perception might be that because you're wildly successful, and whatever that means too, the idea of success, which is a whole other element to this conversation. It may be that, and I have actually said this on the book tour using you, I hope you don't mind, but I've said, like, maybe you have a car waiting for you outside, or like have a yacht down at the Hudson River, or that you have 10,000 square feet of I've seen your studio, 10,000 square feet of this mammoth thing, and have 40 people working for you. But you, in fact, actually work on so many different things, right? You're constantly working. So can you say what your life in a way is the opposite of that lazy, and what you do?
Mm-hmm. I mean, first let me say that, like, if I'm not that successful. If I were, there probably are. There are definitely artists who have the yachts and cars and those things. That happens not to be my predicament. But the schedule would be the same. And I've thought about this in relation to what we're discussing. My relationship with my creative self, which sometimes, incidentally, feels like my boss. I have an idea, and then it's my job as like a person with hands and feet and a brain to carry that out however I can, and that's where the hours come in. It has nothing to do with galleries, or I have a show coming up, or I don't have a show coming up. It's me, and I'm one of those people that has to stop myself from doing, working 24 hours a day, and in certain circumstances, like if I'm on an art residency, I don't stop myself from working 24 hours a day. It can be very all-encompassing. But the point being, this schedule would be the same if I were destitute and working in my mother's basement as it would be if, as it is, then working in my own place. It's the nature, I think, more of creativity than of any market concerns or anything else that has to do with being an artist.
That's great. Do you want to comment?
Well, I second all that. Can you hear me okay? Is this working?
Yeah, if you put it towards your mouth.
Okay. I second all that. I love the feeling that I'm chasing the painting, that the painting is telling me what to do so quickly that all I can do is just run back and forth doing its bidding. But I was thinking about, in terms of how an artist looks, because a lot of us, when we're starting out, we think, oh, if only I was, I don't know, one-legged or something, then I'd get attention. That kind. You always think that you have to be something other than what you are. And I don't know how many of you read that piece on Theaster Gates in the New Yorker, but it was so interesting because, he went to school for a bunch of different things. And he was interested in ceramics, and he was trying to show the ceramics and not getting any attention. And it was when he posed, when he pretended that the work was made by a Japanese boy, the work that he was exhibiting, that he started to get some attention. So it really reinforces that terrible fear we all have that you really should be somebody other than who you are. Anyway, I just...
But you're not.
Well, thank God. Thank God that it all worked out. But it's just that idea that the alter ego, the persona of the artist, is a big deal in the public's imagination.
Yeah, but also that you, sometimes I'll call you and you're multitasking too. Like you talk on the phone, you're painting at the same time, you're listening to NPR, or then in your teaching, you have a family, you're doing things constantly. You're also constantly working. Would you say that as well?
Oh, yeah. The adage of the more you do, the more you can do is so true. I remember when I was struggling, since this is about living and sustaining, when I was struggling in my 20s, I did decorative painting. And I remember when I realized that the decorative painting that I was doing with the glazes and all that I could incorporate some of what I was learning from that into my own work and actually made the work better, was when I realized that, everything we do is part of this just, making stuff. Even dancing in the studio is part of putting on paint a little differently than you did a second before you started to dance. So it's just that idea of keeping your whole body engaged. It's its own little addiction. I can't just sit.
You don't turn it off.
Well, I can certainly just sit, but I'm in front of the painting, but I'm engaging with the painting and trying to bring the subconscious into play.
Erik, can you?
Yeah, I had a boyfriend once who, one morning when he woke up, he said, "I don't want to go to work today. I want to be an artist." And I thought that was funny, but I thought about it a little later in the day, and I thought, he probably thinks I just go sit in a sandbox all day. I mean, it's kind of like, I told people it's like being a small business owner. The more I put into it, the more I get out of it, and I have to put a lot into it to get anything out of it. But it doesn't feel like work because it's great. It's what I was meant to do, and when I was a little kid and I envisioned myself being an artist, I thought I would go to the studio and I would just make stuff all the time. But in reality, I'm lucky if I can spend about half of my time in the studio, and the other half of the time I'm sending out emails or working on photographs or just following up with people I've met, or just networking, going to openings, networking. In movies, openings always seem like these crazy parties, but and they can be a lot of fun, but really it's work. I mean, it's good work, it's all good work, but honestly, you really have to work hard at this job to be a success at it. And I'm glad, I wouldn't have it any other way.
So Josh, you know a lot of artists. You really do. You're out there and you understand their lives too, just from an objective point of view. Would you say that this is pretty consistent from the artists that you know? And do you have examples of how they live differently?
Well, look, I think that there's obviously so many different types of people, so many different types of artists. I think the thing that I look at when I have friends that are artists and notice differences versus, artists who aren't as successful is it tends to be, it's a compulsion. There is no choice. This is what I have to do, and the process is a process that I need to live with, and the creativity is something I need to express. And I think, unfortunately, the gallery system, especially as it is today, and the curatorial system as it is today, and the institutional money in art as it is today, has perverted things quite a bit, so that there are, in fact, artists who I don't think are compelled and live with that same compulsion, who are successful.
Name names.
Yeah.
Now, that's
Yeah, but I don't understand what that means too. Like on the book tour too, we've had different people that have spoken out of the book, and for the most part, most of the contributors would say that they find success to be just having the freedom to continue to do it.
That's my point.
But the audience never thinks that. Like, nothing against you guys. I'm just saying, for the most, never. That's terrible. Never say never. But I'm just saying that a lot of the audience, like at Art Basel, we had someone in the audience who, and you can see this on my website. It's actually, there's a tape from it on my website where I can only paraphrase, it was very long, the question, but essentially she was saying, because someone has their work at Art Basel, let's say at $100,000 price tag, they're at that stature of success, and then she's saying, what about all the other people who aren't here? And then Brian Toll took offense to that, essentially, and he said, why shouldn't we make any money, essentially? And everybody clapped, and it was this strange kind of moment, because it was the perception from the public of one thing, and yet it's, I think even for the person that $100,000 price tag, that might not even be the reality of how that piece is sold at, or maybe it's not even sold at all. Can you comment on any of that? That's a lot.
I mean, yeah, so we have a system where the story is, unfortunately, as much of the pricing as anything else today. The gallery world, I think, has created a tiering system, not like any other subset of society. I mean, you look at the academic journal world, and you've got the A journals, the B journals, and success is defined by whether you're published in an A journal or a C journal, right? And unfortunately, I think that's part of what we're watching. The beauty is, artists, I think, unlike most of the rest of society, doesn't necessarily judge their own success or their peers' success by those prices, by the gallery system. And that's actually, I think, again, something unique to artists. Part of the reason that I have so many friends that are artists is because I think that there is a different understanding of success, and success is defined by fulfilling yourself, your desires, your compulsions. Now, in the art world, unfortunately, the more institutional money that's come into it, the more we've started to look at, and this is not just in art, this is in everything, the financialization of it as a product, which is, how do we strip the emotional or underlying value from the financial value? And so we've got people who buy and sell art like trading cards, never really developing their own eye, which for me is actually how I ended up. I grew up in an artistic family, but for me, my own journey as a collector was really about having limited opportunities to express my creativity because of my job, other than directly in my narrow field. And so the development of my eye became part of my expression. And unfortunately, I think where you've got a world where it's really driven by consultants, by the curatorial world, you've got a necessary separation of the financial asset from the thing in itself.
So what do you guys think about that lack of transparency too in the art world between because each of you have shown in galleries or are showing in galleries? I mean, do you think about it that much, or do you have to deal with it that much? Will, do you?
I actually feel almost completely unconcerned with those issues myself. You know, they touch us in various ways, but like of all the things that could happen, having painting sell for good money for a while is not the worst thing that can happen to any of us. You know, it's another storm to weather, if you want to look at it that way. But it is so far removed from my time in the studio that it sounds to me, even when, of all people, art critics bring this up a lot these days, like they're speaking another language. It's just really not part of my life. My personal relationship with finances has more to do with, as I pick certain projects to do, I know that, for example, I've done a few performative things. I've worked on a few theater things, and those things tend to be money losers. And it would be imprudent for me to spend, the next 3 years doing only money-losing projects. So I have to occasionally think, okay, I better do something that has a chance of making some money so that I can do this. But it doesn't motivate me beyond that.
That's good. Do you guys have any comments about it?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because you're at the point, I'm speaking for you, but it's kind of very freeing when you know that, okay, well, this worked, that this kind of image really worked, and people really liked that, and people valued it and put their money behind it. So I could always go back and do that if I'm starving. But now I can make a crazy tree, with Virginia over there. And that was
She's talking about her
so
last
much
exhibition
fun
at
to
PPOW.
do. The idea that you kind of established your bona fides and now you can be a little nuts is what I think, all the freedom is about. So I'm sure you feel that same way. No?
Maybe not in terms of knowing the particular subject matter.
It's that yacht payment that you have.
No, let's see. I don't ever think there's a thing to go back to. I just think there are some things that I know don't exist within an even potentially commercial environment. That was really all I'm saying about that. And I'm sorry. What were you talking about?
No, we can move on.
Yeah.
Erik, do you want to mention anything?
One of the great things about this job is that we can always challenge ourselves. Like a lot of my friends that do other things are always complaining about their jobs that they don't get challenged in it. And if we don't get challenged, it's because we're not coming up with the challenges. So that's...
But I've always been so surprised. Did I cut you off?
No.
I've always, since we value changing it up and developing skills that take us to places we wouldn't have expected, there's all those signature artists out there, and who's valuing them? But they're valued. I never understand that. Well, so
it seems to be such a contrast.
There's also this other thing, which is, I think, the success, as the financial success often, if there's the wrong relationship between artist and gallerist, which I think is supposed to be a sacred relationship. And so even when you said you had young artists coming up saying, how do I find a gallery? Even in that question, I think the right question is, how do I find the right gallery for me? Just as we were talking about your kid's school. And so you watch a lot of artists make it to that point of success and find themselves in a gallery situation where perhaps the gallery doesn't want them to take those risks anymore. And that becomes part of the driver of the work becoming sort of what you're saying. It isn't ever for you. And it's not that they're still not creative, it's just that there's the wrong relationship directing.
So that's where the critic comes in. That's the fourth estate or something.
Theoretically,
bringing
although the critic also will often say, this wasn't so-and-so's show, this was a very strange show, we're used to, or we like, or he's not doing. And so I think, unfortunately, the institutionalization has negative impacts throughout the art world. And it's so refreshing when you see an artist who's a mid-career or older or well-established artist really take that risk, not because they wanted to provoke, but because it was the direction they were compelled to move in.
Right.
And unfortunately, I think that you see
very
less and
little
less
of that. Yeah. I would think more people would point it out.
I think you might be wrong about that. I know I've seen shows and I thought, God, how is Jasper John still making that piece or something? For example. But
I think that's such a rarefied level.
Yeah. Nevertheless, I think there's an assumption that artists kind of stick to this safe road that we're on because, well, but let's just make another show of product or something.
No, I'm suggesting gallerists want the artists to
Okay,
stay
again,
sometimes.
I think there's
Actually, I had if we're naming
Yeah.
names,
Yeah.
I have a friend who had a show at a very well-known gallery. And,
You're not.
yeah, I know.
I thought you were going to name names.
Okay, I want to hear this.
I felt very let down.
I know.
Having put forward a completely different body of work, which I loved. I thought it was among the most wonderful work I'd seen from the artist in a long time, because it was daring and, it was they were compelled to create this body.
Yeah.
And the gallerist was sort of not very happy about the work, and the gallerist didn't even come out of her office during the opening. And the message that sends to the artist is...
So but the gallerist did show the work.
The gallerist did show the work, but there was a time commitment, there was a schedule, and the work was not really brought in until shortly before it was being hung. And you don't know whether the gallerist was expecting that to be the show or not.
But can I just say something? But in this book, just to get back to that for a second, in this book, though, there are artists that work with galleries and not work with galleries.
Absolutely. No,
Right, so that's not the end all. That's what I was trying to get to in the beginning, that partnership is just part of the equation. And that what you're saying to me, too, is you do all these other projects and you're involved yourself aside from that relationship. Is that correct?
That's true, and part of what that does is actually gets me off the hook with needing to convince Mary Boone that she should put on Peter and the Wolf, because there's another avenue for that. There are all kinds of things, and so if I have creative impulses that may not be gallery appropriate, it doesn't matter. It's not going to stop me. Which I think, it's something I think about in terms of creativity a lot, and in terms of responding to this creative boss I have within myself, that one of my jobs is to find that appropriate thing and to figure out how to make it happen within the constraints of reality. So if I want to set up a bakery for the next week, it's not something I even asked Mary about, but let's say she's not into the idea of making her gallery into a bakery, that doesn't matter. Like that's not going to stop me, and I have to slowly work away at what the obstacles are to the point that it actually happens.
But if you wanted to do a body of work, painting, and you wanted to do it elsewhere, would that end up being impactful to your relationship or allowed on your relationship? Which I think is really more the corollary than a different genre, a different outlet for your creativity that we're talking about.
Yeah, maybe I'm just lucky. I mean, we are talking about my dealer. It's my only experience, and I've also been able to make that happen. Notably recently in terms of these lithograph prints I wanted to make. Mary has no interest in prints at all, but other people do, and it's, that's all.
I think that just before we start to open up to the public, the reason why I'm bringing these points up is that I do think that there's a difference between what's perceived and really what's underneath. And I think that one reason why this book is so popular, it's in its 4th printing, and actually after Josh and I did an interview with Kathleen Hayes and Vonnie Quinn. They're not here, are they? Are they here? They were supposed to be here tonight, but
That's Kathleen's husband.
Oh, hi. I love her. She's awesome. I'm sure you do too.
He does too.
Right. But anyway, after that, we sold 80 books in an afternoon, because the public is very interested in this idea that the artist is this romantic person, but I hope they're not going to return the book, because the artist, there's nothing romantic about being an artist. So at least I've been saying that all along, but that's what I think this book shows, is that we have these skills and mobility and flexibility to be able to live in the cracks and sustain a creative life in all different ways. And you guys touched upon that a little bit, and you also spoke about the difference in the market and touched upon that perceptual difference. Do you want to say something brief before we open up? Anybody? Okay, so does anybody want to chime in on this conversation? Any questions or comments of these wonderful people? Yes.
So, just a couple of things. You talked about how artists were the ones who, there's what's known as success, but then the artists actually have their own ideas of which artists are successful regardless of the monetary. And I think that's true in a lot of disciplines. You mentioned academics. There may be some academics who have great publication records, but among their colleagues, among the rest of their environment, they know who they think really have the chops and who are. Then something that I would like to hear from you guys is that I can tell from your conversations are that you all have the skills, you all have the creativity and the artistic, but I think one of the reasons, and I'd be curious if you agree, that you're having the level of success you have is that you have kind of some sort of well-rounded personality that makes those decisions of, yeah, I'd love to do all this stuff, but if I don't do something like this, and if I don't return this person's call, and if I'm a total jerk all the time, this isn't going to work. So having that, not only have the artistic skills, but the type of personality that somebody can tolerate enough to make it all work.
I totally agree. If you're difficult, that's the kiss of death, I think. I think. But Eric, do you want to talk about that? No, but you're not difficult at all. I didn't say that. I love him.
I learned.
He wouldn't be in this book if he was a difficult person.
I always thought this job was just about going to my studio and being alone and doing what I want to do. And that's what I did for a long time. And I didn't really know how to socialize, and I didn't really know how to talk to strangers. I didn't feel comfortable doing that. And I had a boyfriend who was really successful at that. He was great at parties. I would just see him go in, and he'd command the whole room in minutes. And we talk about this. I was like, well, how did you're different. You were born that way. I wasn't born that way. He's like, no, I wasn't born that way. I had to learn it. And so watching him and hearing that from him, I thought, well, if he can learn it, I can learn it. And I learned it, and I like it. What I find is that it's a great, being in the studio alone all day is fantastic, and I love it, but it's really great to get out of there and then go to an opening and talk with 20 people and meet a whole bunch of strangers, and it's fantastic.
Julie, you want to say anything? I knew you wanted to say something.
I just, for some reason, what popped into my head is because I was just like you, very shy, and the longing I had to not be shy, with the motivation as well. How, I guess I don't know why I'm bringing this up, but the Prozacification of the world, that when you suppress those huge desires because it doesn't feel good, how bad that is. But, I know some people. I think so. I mean, so much. Penelope Lively was just talking on Terry Gross, and she was talking about it all starts in your 50s. And, that idea that finally I'm not, just riven with self-doubt and shyness and all that,
I would say that definitely happened to me. I always used to think like it's a fluke that I got in, like it was been my dream to get in the art world. And when I first got offered a show, I thought, oh my God, this is amazing. But I can't let anybody find out who I really am, or they'll kick me out.
I think we all
really are?
Okay, so all the artists in the audience who feel that way, raise your hand.
and now I look at my resume, and it's like I used to have to pad my resume to make it look long enough, and now I have to edit it. And I've had 7 solo shows, and just looking at that on my resume, 7 solo shows in New York. If I were a fraud, they would have found out by now. I can just relax and be myself, and I do.
I wish you felt that way though before. But
I know, right?
But actually, I think in terms of the perception versus the reality, I think you touched on it, and I think it's true of really every successful, and I mean successful, not in the financial, but well-rounded, happy with their career, happy with their work, artist is they also recognize, and I think Sharon represents this, teaches this, really is an amazing ambassador to the arts. in helping young artists to also understand that it's not just about the creation, it is also about the business and the management and the managing of your career. And I think that's ultimately what defines the difference, is the self-direction in taking control of that aspect as well, rather than leaving that to someone else to do for you.
Yeah. I think though the business part, I don't see it as a separate entity, but that's just my thing. Randy, you had a question?
Yeah, among the writers aspiring to serious literary work, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, nearly nobody makes a living from their writing. And most of them are making a living by being affiliated with some university or another. What's the equivalent in your world? Because you were saying there are many people, well, they don't have galleries, and there are only so many galleries. Well, how do people live?
I was a carny last summer. That was great. It was really fun. I was a carny. I had a antique French carousel.
Carnival work is there's so few opportunities.
I considered making that a career, but there's not a lot.
Is there no equivalent? Is there no, when you're telling...
Well, you're saying are you saying that all of the different things that artists do to sustain their creative life? I think everything that an artist does is an extension of their practice. So what they choose to do. So it used to be taboo where people, if you taught, then you weren't an artist, or I think that an artist can be an educator. You can be an artist educator. It's extension of your practice, inevitably. I believe that. I believe that, like Brian Novotny in this book, he chose to do art handling, even though he has like 4 galleries and he's, quote, successful, whatever the hell that means, but he's not sustaining his financial living every day based on the galleries that he's with. So he needed to have like a steady job. He didn't want to do the up and down of living as an artist, and he chose that because he wanted to be around art. He wanted something physical in his life, and he wanted to be around other people in his community. So he chose that. So I think that artists do all different things to try to sort of support that creativity mentally or physically.
But there's not kind of...
There's no silver bullet.
Equivalent to, well, you're going to end up at a university if you're a writer. If
No.
writer, you probably will.
No, but I
Nothing
think...
in the art world like that.
I mean, but there are a lot of artists who are working in academia.
Well, it's true, but we make
But-
things. We make things.
Well,
So
these writers, right.
right, no, I know, but I remember being 20 and selling my work at the Santa Cruz Flea Market, and this guy 20 years later told me that he owned one of my pieces that he had bought at the Santa Cruz Flea Market. I needed to sell that work for $15, and I could do that tomorrow.
Does he still have it, or do you put up an auction?
I don't know.
Just curious. Sorry, isn't that terrible that I just said that? But I was just curious.
So I think we probably did the whole range. I sold, I sewed, I revamped clothing, I did portraits.
You did too. You were a contractor, right?
Contractor, yeah. I have a quick question. Writers affiliated with universities, what does that mean? Does it mean that they
teach?
It means they teach. So they're putting time. Yeah. Okay. Artists do that too. Okay. Yeah. Your question. I'm sorry. Oh, contracted.
You did that too. You were a contractor, right? And you fix people's houses.
Yep, I built them. Built
houses.
Not houses. No, my God, that sounds so impressive. No. Long story short, I got some contracting skills because I needed to make my own loft livable, which meant I learned basic plumbing and electric and sheetrock hanging, and found that those skills were useful to acquaintances and friends of mine. And went on to take small jobs and do, fairly shoddy contracting for people.
Oh God, that's
unlicensed, unbonded.
Oh,
yeah.
No one's gotten hurt, though.
No one got hurt?
We don't know that.
Okay, yes, Amy.
This is really fascinating, and I have about 25 questions, but just to ask one that syncs up to the last question. What are some of your observations about how the way artists have supported themselves have changed over time? Because when you mention the idea of English professors who write novels, it also seems like that has changed, and that actually a lot of artists and writers have a problem of adjunct pay for teaching.
Absolutely.
And there's also this golden era of, the abstract expressionist painters who had unionized jobs as MoMA guards and looked at art all day. And so I'm just sort of curious your observations even in the last 5 years or longer, how that's evolved for you or for people you know.
Anybody? It's a tough one. Eric?
One of the coolest jobs I had, actually, I worked in a mannequin factory painting faces on mannequins. And from that, I learned how to paint portraits, because I didn't go to art school, so I didn't really know how faces were put together, but that'll really teach you.
Yeah, I wonder if this has changed. So I graduated from Yale, and I looked in the phone book for interior decorators, and I just contacted them all, and they gave me tons of really fun work. I was thinking about that with the mannequins. I had to do all kinds of weird projects for them. Would it be different now? Would anybody? I mean, would that be how you'd go about it?
I think as far as evolution, just from this book and then doing research and talking to a lot of people on this tour, I think there are a lot more opportunities because there's a lot more less taboo, and that artists can just do whatever they want versus 20 years ago. There was a story someone said in the audience in one of the, and I forget where it was, in one of these stops on the book tour, where they said they were an artist assistant. They were working for a established artist in New York. They were only working for that person part-time. So that person had people in their studio just hanging out, and the studio assistant was just talking about that they're going to get a job. I forgot what they said, like a bartender, what have you. And mind you, this is 20 years ago, but the friends of the artist that the person was working for said, oh, you're a failure if you have another job. So that kind of meant, which is such, bullshit. That's not what it is today. And it was terrible than it was then. And I remember that too, when I got out of school, that kind of pressure where you shouldn't be seen if you're waiting tables, essentially. I think that taboo is so over, it's ridiculous. I think that artists can do whatever they want, and it's accepted, and what they choose, just so long as they're making really good work and in the dialogue, I think that's all that counts. So that, I think, is the evolution, rather than exactly what they're doing. I think that there's a lot more opportunities now, and more than ever, for, like I said, for an artist to sustain in different ways and what they choose, and that's a big part of it. Okay, questions? All the way in the back. Jane. This is Jane South, and she has a show opening, actually, this Saturday.
I'm one of those lazy artists that should be.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I think this kind of conversation, and I'm sure Sharon, because you've been to some different places, it's going to be very different depending on where you are.
That's right.
Yeah.
We're in New York. I
Right.
moved here 23 years ago. I waitressed 3 nights a week. 1 week waitressing pay equals 1 month's rent. That equation no longer
That's correct.
exists, and now I teach, and I do graphic design, and I have a third job. So I'm really free because I have 3 other jobs. So I think that the other important point to make is that, we do have a responsibility as artists to also make our own opportunities. So
Right.
we don't need a commercial gallery necessarily. We curate our own shows, and we can still do that even here in New York City. And for example, I started a little salon at my house 2 years ago where some people who were here have been, and it's not about networking. People are not allowed to talk about their own work. They have to talk about just some other interests they have, but inevitably people meet each other. So I think what motivates you is a really important part, and I think people can smell it if you're there to network, as opposed to if you are there to be a part of a creative community.
Or just be a good person. That would be good to start with that. Okay, any comments to that, or any comments?
I like that distinction very much, actually, and I think, again, it's important to take the commercial out of it.
Yeah.
I have people come to my house too, and we draw together sometimes, and that is an inherently, for us, non-commercial endeavor, because none of us are showing or selling these drawings. It's just a thing to do, and the passion there is just the conversation about art. And yeah.
But that's also like a generosity of spirit. I think that what you're saying too about making something happen for other artists, I think that's That's really, really good. And I think oftentimes I've found that artists work in a vacuum and they're not reaching out to even talk about money. I think artists don't talk about money enough, nor do they exchange enough in those opportunities. Okay, I had a question back here. Yeah.
So it seems like, I mean, I understand that you all don't want to talk about like the financial side because it can corrupt the artistic process. I mean, not that you don't want to talk about it, but you don't want to bring it into the studio.
Oh.
But to what extent does the social context in which your art's being shown impact what happens in the studio, for instance? I mean, I'm thinking of the definition of artist not just being a visual artist, but a musician, right? Chamber music work to be played in the living room, an orchestral piece to be played in an orchestral setting, solo piece, etc., right? To what extent, or even academic publishing, it's got to fit on a two-dimensional flat paper. It can't be a movie, for instance, to show your simulation. To what extent does your social context in which the piece is going to be shown impact your artistic process, or are you completely devoid of that kind of audience aspect of it? Is it only you who are the audience?
Julie, do you want to answer that?
That's a really interesting question, and what comes up for me, which is very kind of crass and commercial, is one of the reasons that I'm not as crazy about showing at art fairs, even though art fairs are the way that the commercial world is going, because it's so it's so demoralizing in terms of whatever kind of integrity you might be able to have in your work. The thing with the gallery is that it's a white box, which is a very neutral space, and you can take out walls and paint walls and festoon it with turkey feathers or whatever you want to do, and it's yours. Which I guess you could also do at an art fair, but it's so it's so kind of compromised by all the other people around you. I'm only just bringing that up because it does seem like there's a lot of people who would prefer to show in art fairs now because you get a much bigger audience than to throw all your lot in with your solo show. I don't know, you guys have any?
But how does the financial aspect or what you're saying is, I'm trying to repeat that so to get back to the question, like how does that have an impact on your work, if at all?
Not the financial, the social.
I mean the social aspect.
Context, whether it's going to be in somebody's living room or whether it's going to be at an art fair or whether it's going to be in a gallery.
Do you think about that at all when you're doing your work?
My answer is actually no. Personally, I'm an audience of one, and I've come to that after just doing this for years and years and years. And the only good thing that can happen to me is I get excited about my own work. Right. That's it.
Except, really quickly, just as a mechanical point, when you see your work through somebody else's eyes, whether it be, your husband or your friend, you suddenly see it differently. And when you see it in a show, you see it differently. And to me, it's all about that. I mean, it's nice to, it's not all about that, but that's a big part of it.
But part of what we're talking about, I think is that comes with the benefit of experience and age. And so the answers that I've heard to many of these questions are very different than the answers I would hear from young emerging artist friends of mine who don't have that benefit of experience. I'll give you an example of it was an artist, this was a while ago, who was a friend of mine, and I saw one of his pieces and I went, wow, I love this. I'm going away for a week on business. I really want this in my life. Okay. And I came back to find that his gallerist had a certain well-known collector from Miami come through and said, this is really the right place for you to place it. And so that piece was sold. And as I said to this very young artist, it's a very dangerous slope for you to go down, to create your work and consider where it's placed first and foremost, rather than that it's placed with someone who actually really loves it, wants it in their life, and will be therefore also a more committed custodian of your work. Because the truth is that piece, like so many of the other pieces, ended up burned a year later as they were flipped in auctions. And you watch this process, and I think so many of the artists, young artists, are thinking about the social context. Don't use certain colors. right? We all know there are certain colors that you just don't use.
Really? What are those?
No,
I mean,
really,
tell me now.
Pink and yellow are hard colors to
Forget it. Are
sell
you
at auction.
kidding?
If
Yeah,
you
but
look it up-
hopefully
what
they're
I'm
not
saying is-
thinking that. I mean, they can't.
Sharon.
That bothers me. I
It
mean,
bothers the hell out of me, but that's my point, is you're coming at this from a context of an established or a more confident or a more experienced artist who has learned to trust yourself
Right.
rather than the questioning, self-questioning, unconfident, younger artist who may feel exactly as you do and as I do that that's disgusting, but is more conscious of the social context because they are younger, they are less experienced, they are more insecure. And so,
I understand, but hopefully that they'll latch onto this, like, not
hopefully-
feel that.
Hopefully.
Okay, two more. Say again?
If I could just ask me, I feel like that
Tony.
is perpetuating, though, this myth of an artist who just sits in his studio and never cares about the outside world, when in fact, there's no way to really, we're not Henry Darger, right? There's no way to put your art out and separate it completely from the social context and the fact that you're not the only one looking at it. And I find it unsettling that you guys, that everyone in the panel sort of agrees that they don't have any consideration for how your art is received, when in fact we are putting it out for a purpose. We are not literally just creating to stick it in a closet and please ourselves.
No, I don't think we said that.
Well, I did, so I'll speak to that very quickly. Yeah.
Just
no.
briefly, though.
Yeah.
Which I really admire, but I feel like your work in particular is very much married to the idea of how the public perceives it. So I find that so.
And here's the reason that I separate the two things in my mind. It's one I have total control over, and the other I have no control over. Therefore, I cannot concern myself. I can watch it happen. I can sit outside and be an observer of how that plays out. But it's very important to me that I not put it in the same box as my creative environment. It has nothing to do with that because it's out of my control. That's all.
Yeah, but I have somebody who was still making these paintings you've been making, and none of them were selling, like for years.
Yeah.
Would that start questioning why you were making?
I think about this a lot in terms of a sort of desert island scenario. To take it even a step further, would I keep making work on a desert island if there's no possibility of a communicative aspect? And I've convinced myself that I would. I feel genuinely like I would. That's how I seem to behave in the studio. Yeah.
But also, I think you can find another audience then, perhaps.
But it's also,
I'm sorry, we had to do one more question, but go ahead.
well,
Really brief.
it is a rhetorical device. It is a way of getting your ideas across there. And if my ideas aren't getting across in one way or another, it doesn't have to be through sales, but if there's no reviews, if there's no artist friend enthusiasm, I'm not communicating very well, and I'm not going to be happy about that, and I will make changes.
Jean has the last question.
I was just going to mention this idea that that's not typical of just a certain genre of artists. I mean, I work in public space, so there's museum commissions,
Right.
public art, and you are definitely thinking of all this. And there's no consumer audience, there's no audience that walks by the public space there. So it's not the only venue, you know.
Well, I'm not suggesting that at
So
all.
it may not be the social context, but there are many artists who practice in very different arenas.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I know 100%.
So listen, we have to conclude here for the moment, but what's so great about these conversations is that we're still going to be here. So you can come up to them, they're going to sign books for you, and Josh can even sign them.
No.
But also, I just want to say before we go, Josh is returning here. His first job coming to New York was at the Strand. So that is really cool. So I think that is really nice for him to come back. I want to thank everybody for being here and being a part of this conversation. Follow us on, I was supposed to say live tweeting, I didn't do it. And I want to say thank all the donors for the Kickstarter, because that has supported us on this book tour. And if you want to come along to the rest on the book tour, follow me on my website and on Twitter and on Facebook. And you reach out to all of the contributors in this book and the ones who are here and through email on their websites. So thanks, and thank you all very, very much. And I'm doing another book. Thank you so much.